Alright, so welcome back to Dominion Empires What's in the Box, Part 2. Alright, so we left off with still having some split piles remaining. Well, one split pile and one, castle supply pile. Okay, so here we have the Patrician, and this one gives you a card and gives you an action, and that's basic. But then reveal the top card of your deck. If it costs 5 or more, you get to put it into your hand. So that's kind of cool. You could possibly reveal the top card, and it could possibly be something 5 or more, and put it into your hand. And that could include something like a duchy, for instance, or a province, because that costs more than 5, or 5, for that matter. So, I mean, or you could get a gold, who knows. But if you play this in the beginning of the game, most likely you will not have very many cards costing 5, so getting the card in the action is basic. Now, and not that great in that sense. But then you have Emporium, which is underneath it, and so once all 5 patricians are gone, you'll be able to buy this. But it's recommended that you shouldn't buy this unless you have 5 cards in play. Or gain this for that matter. When you gain this, if you have at least 5 actions in play, you'll get +2 victory tokens. So that's really awesome. But only if you have those 5 action cards in play. So it's recommended that you try not to buy this or gain this unless you can get those victory tokens. Although if you want to get it anyways because of the basicness of the card, because it's a little better than Patrician because it gives you a card, an action, and a treasure, that's fine too. But I try to hold off buying it or gaining it unless I know I'm going to get the +2 victory tokens. Because otherwise, there's no point in really buying it, and I'd rather buy something else costing 5 unless I got those 2 victory tokens as well. Alright, and then we have the castle pile. Now, it's not really a split pile because there's so many different castles in here. And it's not 5 castles and then 5 differently named castles after that either. It's at most 2 to 1 castle each of each type of castle in this supply pile here. And another thing, if you were only playing with 2 people, you would never have 2 copies of any castle, period. You would just have 1. But if you're playing with 3 or 4 people, then obviously you'd have them all. Now, so let's get started with these. So first we have the Humble Castle. And it's a treasure, basically. And it's worth 1 victory point per castle you have. So if you focused on buying a lot of these castles, this could be worth quite a bit of points. But remember, you'll most likely only have 1 of these. In a 3 or 4 player game, somebody else will most likely buy the other Humble Castle before you, assuming you get the Humble Castle yourself. But then after the Humble Castles are done and gone, the next castle will be up next, the Crumbling Castle. And this is kind of a cool castle. It's worth 1 victory point. And then when you gain or trash this, you'll get +1 victory token. And you'll also gain a silver. So that's a really cool card. Sometimes I just try to get that. I may not focus on getting the castles, but I'll get that because it'll at least give me a victory token when I gain it. And it'll give me a silver when I gain it. And then later, I'll most likely trash it, so that way I'll get another victory token and another silver. So that's a pretty good little strategy, and since this is only worth 1 victory point anyway, you're basically getting 2 victory points that don't clog up your deck by getting rid of this and gaining this. So that's really cool. And so, after the Crumbling Castle, and there's only 1 of those, after the Crumbling Castle, we have a castle called Small Castle. And it's, a relatively small castle. So, trash this or a castle from your hand. If you do, gain a castle. And it's worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. So, you could basically trash, if you had it in your hand, the Crumbling Castle. You could trash the Crumbling Castle. You would still get to keep your small castle to use it later to trash another castle, to gain another castle. So that'd be cool. You could potentially play this card, and there's 2 of these small castles. You could play this card to trash the Crumbling Castle, which would give you a victory token and a silver. And then you would gain the Haunted Castle, probably, because that was next. Not necessarily. It could be a further castle down the road by the time you decided to play this. So, after the Crumbling Castle and the small castles are gone, Then we have the Haunted Castle. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it's haunted. It's just a dark, old, spooky castle that has been abandoned. At least in my eyes, that's just the case. It's not necessarily haunted by any means. So it's sort of a vague card, kind of like the Haunted Woods from Adventures. Just kind of a spooky woods. Well, this is just kind of a old, abandoned, nobody goes here castle, basically. So it's a vague card. So I kept it. 2 victory points it's worth. But when you gain this during your turn, gain a gold. And each other player with 5 or more cards in hand puts 2 cards from their hand onto their deck. So that's kind of cool. You get a gold when you get this. That's really cool. And then you get to attack your opponents, sort of, because it's not considered an attack card, but they're going to put 2 cards from their hand on top of their deck. Kind of like Ghost Ship from Seaside, for instance. That is kind of cool. And it's only a one-time thing, though. So it's not like you're going to get a bunch of haunted castles and get to do this multiple times. This is a one-time offer. But it's pretty cool nonetheless, and it might be worth gaining just for that effect of getting a gold and getting to attack your opponents that they can't, which they can't even block because it's not considered an attack card, which is really cool. This is probably one of the better castles, though, especially if you have a lot of victory cards. Next, we have the Opulent Castle, and there's 2 of these. So, discard any number of victory cards, plus 2 treasure per card discarded. It's worth 3 victory points at the end of the game, so it's basically a duchy, but it does cost 7. But if you have a lot of victory cards in your hand, you could play this, discard all of them, and you'll get 2 money. So this could be very useful. If you have a very powerful turn where you're drawing tons of cards, you have tons of actions, and you play this as an action, and you have tons of victory cards in your hand, you're going to get a lot of money. That's really awesome. If you can pull that off, wonderful. But not too often do you get to play this, that you get to pull off a powerful turn like that. I've only gotten to do it one time, and then the rest of the time, I'm lucky to discard 1 victory card to get 2 money out of the deal. Then we have the Sprawling Castle. This one is going to give you 4 victory points, but when you gain this, gain a duchy or 3 estates. So you could gain a duchy, and that would be 7 points. You could gain 3 estates, and that would still be 7 points. But, you know, if you... I guess there could be some strategic advantage of going after 3 estates some way, somehow. There are some victory cards out there that are worth a lot of victory points if you have a lot of victory cards. So you going that route could be useful in that sense. But, like, I think Silk Road is the one I'm thinking of that would work with this from Hinterlands. But usually, most often, you'll just go after the duchy so the 3 estates don't clog up your deck. Then we have the Grand Castle. Yes, the Grand Castle. For 5 victory points. And then when you gain this, reveal your hand and reveal 1 victory card, one victory token per victory card in your hand or in play. That's really cool. So when you get this, if you have a lot of victory tokens, a lot of victory cards in your hand when you get this, you'll get a victory token for each one. That is awesome. But that's only assuming you have a bunch of victory cards in your hand at the time. Then we have the last castle, and there's 2 of these too. King's Castle. And this is worth 2 victory points per castle you have. It's also worth 10. So that's kind of cool. They've all been worth 1 more than each other all the way up the road to leading to 10. Starting with the Humble Castle at 3. So that's pretty cool that we've gone this far. So this is obviously a lot better than that Humble Castle because it's going to give you 2 victory points per castle you have. But once again, if you didn't buy a bunch of castles, this is worthless to you. Because if you only bought maybe 1 castle and then you get this, so that's only 4 victory points. And if you're going to spend this much money, you might as well just go after a province, which is going to give you 6. So you have to do the math. How many castles did you get? Is this worth getting? If you have been focused on the castle strategy and you've been getting tons of castles, then it's worth it. Otherwise, not so much. So that's it for this video, and we'll continue on in the next video with the next cards.